Good afternoon. My name is Pablo Jimenez. I come from the Fulbright Commission. I'm going to present to you the opportunities we have for postdoctoral students of Fulbright scholarships. We have a group of alumni here and scholars, Fulbright ambassadors present as well in the room, and our alumni will answer some questions, some practical questions, as soon as we finish this presentation in about half an hour. After that, we will have questions as well. So anyone who has any questions about the scholarships will be able to respond. The postdoctoral scholarships are given by an institution, are part of a program that has the goal of promoting bilateral exchange between Australia and the US. And this program is Fulbright, and is the largest scholarships program in the world, and certainly the biggest one between Australia and the US collaboration. Our program was created in 1946 on initiative of Senator William Fulbright. He saw the horrors of Second World War and try to propose a different way of getting problems solved. So why not spend money and all the energies that go into war for something different, for the collaboration between countries and the understanding between countries. We all have cliches about people in different neighborhoods, in different cities, in different countries. I have had German friends, for instance, and immediately you expect them to fit with the stereotype that we have about Germans. So when one of my German friends tells a joke or starts laughing, I say, well, what's wrong with you? I mean, you are German. You are supposed to be just, grim and not understand any humor. And I'm Mexican and originally from Mexico. So in Mexico, it's the other way around. Sometimes I meet people and I tell them, where are you from? And I said, I'm from Sweden. And they look at me like and say, no, I'm joking, I'm from Mexico. And say, okay, like they are relieved because actually I don't fit the stereotype that you have of Scandinavian people, in a certain way. We speak in Tasmania about Queenslanders, and in Queensland about people from Canberra, and in Canberra from people from Western Australia and so on. We all have stereotypes. But when those stereotypes become something destructive and a way to label people and to make them feel not part of the mainstream society, or even a group that should be done away with, then that becomes really a negative thing. And the idea of Fulbright, the main intuition of Fulbright is let people know each other through work and through collaboration, through study, through research, and face each other and find ways in which, as human beings, that we all have in common many things, just get to know each other, to enrich each other, and to collaborate together. And this is a different path to the path of war. Unfortunately, after 50 and 60 years, war is not out of the equation in many parts of the world. And so Fulbright is a positive force trying to bring a different message and trying to promote collaboration and linkage. So that is the idea of Fulbright. We have about 360,000 alumni worldwide. And in Australia, the program was created in 1949. We have about 5,000 Australian American Fulbright alumni. And it was one of the first treaties between Australia and the US, and one of the first Fulbright programs in the world outside the US as well. The Australian Prime Minister and the US Ambassador are the co-chairs of of the Fulbright Commission. The Commission is one of 60 in the world that special bodies that have been created and are not only to receive funding from the US to give scholarships, but also contribute in the country, in this case in Australia. So our main sponsors are the US government and the Australian government. The Fulbright values are passion for your field of work and study, vision for what you have at the moment, what you want to do in the future, and also for what you want to impact in terms of your community, your country. Excellence in what you are doing. Innovation, being able to contribute with new solutions to sometimes old problems. The capacity to create linkages and collaborations, and ambassadorial skills. All this information that I'm giving you is on our website, and it's been updated constantly. So any time that you want to refer to this or to have these presentations as well, we can send them to you. But also the information about the opportunities we have on the website, they are there. The scholarship benefits are, in the case of the postdoctoral scholarship, is 3 to 10 months. We pay you a monthly stipend, because the main focus of the Fulbright scholarship is the living expenses. Sometimes you have an arrangement to have a tuition waiver. In this case, the postdoctoral is just a research project, but the most difficult thing when you go to another country is the living expenses, especially in the US. So the Fulbright is trying to address that to supplement that problem. You receive insurance support as well when you are doing your visa applications. You receive a special kind of application for very similar to the diplomatic one. You have an orientation program that is addressed to give you all the information you need in order to go to the US once you have received the Fulbright scholarship. And a place where you meet with the US scholars as well. So this happens usually around March, during the presentation evening, and then the day before and after we have several activities. One of them is this orientation program for new scholars. In the US, you have the support of 2 organizations. One is IIE and the other one is CIES. Both of them depend on the State Department, and Fulbright is a flagship program of the State Department of the United States. And through those institutions, you receive support as well to attend conferences, to have new enrichment opportunities, and to be accompanied during your time in the US. The Commission makes an effort to continue helping you and supporting you as well, connecting you with the vast network of alumni that we have, alumni in the US. And of course, when you come back, we try to follow up and keep in touch with you. My work at the Commission is in the alumni relations area, and our work is try to continue to be connected with all of our alumni. Some postdoctoral scholarships are at the state level. So if you see all these different categories, you just have in mind that you can apply to several of them. So you fill only one application, but you can tick some boxes. And those boxes that you can tick as many as you wish to be considered in different categories of scholarship. So one of them is the state scholarship, which means a scholarship sponsored by the state, in this case by Victoria. The postdoctoral scholarship is the same in terms of the amount of money you receive and the amount of time you are supported, but your focus has to be in bringing back to the state your expertise and the work that you have been doing. We have an indigenous scholarship addressed to people who identify themselves as indigenous and who want to be don't apply for this scholarship. We received an endowment from the government of $1 million 2 years ago, so this is a scholarship that is ongoing. There is a postdoctoral scholarship in cultural competence, sponsored by the University of Sydney. Cultural competence means how to be open and how to appreciate cultural diversity in our midst, in the universities, in society. And so it's much broader than just, for instance, valuing indigenous culture or Aboriginal culture in Australia. It's about learning how to cope and how to appreciate cultural differences. That's this scholarship about. And we have a new scholarship sponsored by RMIT called the Vice Chancellor Scholarship. And this scholarship has several fields of interest, and you can read them here or on our website. You can read them here if I'm not blocking you, but I think I'm blocking a number of you. Those fields of interest, you can see if one of them is close to what you are doing, you can apply on this scholarship as well. So here, for instance, I'm just going to give you an example. So, social change, urban futures, advanced materials, biomedical health and innovation, design and creative practice, and so on. The package in this particular scholarship is a bit higher than the other ones. The value goes up to $47,000. And the total program is 3 years. So it's a very attractive scholarship. And constantly we are renewing our offer, bless you, we are renewing our offering of scholarships because many people want to sponsor Fulbright scholars and what Fulbright does with scholars and with exchange. The application process, some of the most important things to take into account. You have a project proposal, which is what usually we think when you are going to get a scholarship, what you want to achieve in the time that you're going to be doing your scholarship. There is a personal statement as well, because in Fulbright we're interested not only in what you are planning to do, but also in who you are and who you want to be. That is very important. That other component of leadership, of personal leadership, is very important in Fulbright as well. The referees, you need to have references from people who will give a very good opinion about you. So you have to choose carefully who your referees are going to be. You cannot see the references they are giving about you. So it's good to make sure that they have a high idea about you, and they can speak about you ideally in different ways. So one of your referees may know you in terms of your academic skills. Another one may know you in terms of how you are in terms of, in leadership, for instance. And another one may know another aspect of you. So if those referees are important, and you have to chase up with them to try to get them to submit in time the references as well. Since our application system is a worldwide system used in 160 countries, then it's very important to submit, to make sure that you have all your information complete and submit in time. Because if you don't do it, we cannot do anything from Australia. We cannot modify the system. It's called the EMBARK system. It sounds like the Matrix, but yeah, it's just a system that helps us assess all the applications all over the world. The selection and eligibility criteria. You need to have good professional and academic credentials. Your program has to be relevant. So why should you be supported if, in comparison with many other applicants that probably will have a very good project? So you have to think about that. Potential outcomes. You have to show your ambassadorial skills, which are this part of the leadership, that you are thinking beyond yourself and beyond your own project. You want to do something for someone else, benefit your society, contribute something to your country. Something that I don't see here, but it's very, very important, is that try to get someone from a different field to read your application. And one of our Fulbright ambassadors is present here, Zlatko Skirbis, and he has been in committee in selection panels. So the selection panels are made of people from very different fields. So try to, if your project is on natural sciences, on biology, so then get someone from literature to read your application. If they can understand it, then it's a good application. If you are in maths, have a lawyer reading your application. If you are a lawyer, get an economist, and so on. Someone from a very different field, and if they are able to understand what you're trying to propose, then that's a good application. You should be able to do that because our selection panels are interdisciplinary. There is no age limit, but in the case of the postdoctoral scholarship, ideally you will have had finished your PhD within 3 years of applying. So in some circumstances even to 5 years, but not beyond that so far. So ideally you haven't, it hasn't been a long time since you have finished your PhD for you to be a successful applicant. Applications open on the 1st of May and close on the 1st of August. So you are still in time to apply if you are thinking about it. In September and October, the applications are assessed. There is an assessment process in every state. Then there is a national selection, and then the applications are assessed in the US as well. So by the time you get a phone call, if you do get one in December, it means that you have gone through at least 3 layers of assessment, and you should be very proud if you receive a phone call. If you don't get the scholarship, many people apply 2 or 3 times, and that's fine. You can apply as many times as you wish, because every year the pool of applicants is different. And if you don't get a scholarship, it's not like in a normal test that's, at university, that if you didn't get a good mark, it means that you don't know the subject. In this case, you may know the subject, but there may be other people who also knew the subject and have some elements to them that made them more eligible for a selection that year. But in another year, on a different kind of scholarship, you were applying for the RMIT one, say, but now you are going for a general category or for the indigenous one. And so in a different category or in a different year, you may have more chances to win the scholarship. This is one of the reasons why we don't give feedback when after the selection process. It's a worldwide policy, but one of the reasons is that the pool of applicants changes every year. In December, you know about it. In March, usually we have an event, a presentation evening, when in one capital city of the country, we present all our scholars with government dignitaries, with sponsors, with alumni. And after that event, in which we have the orientation program as well, that I already told you about, you have a few months to prepare to take up your scholarship as of July. During that time, between the time that you have been officially announced and the time you go, you may be approached by different media outlets to give an interview, to tell your university about your success, about your achievement. And part of the preparation we give you during the orientation program is how to, for those people who don't have a lot of training on media, for instance, how to manage that. Our website, as I was telling you before, is our first point of contact, and we have all our colleagues there. On our website, you can see all our names and you can see our emails. So it's something that you can get there on the website. And but if you go to our website, you can find all the information. There is information for Australian applicants, information for US applicants. And if you go to the Australian applicants, you can see there postdoctoral scholarships and all the scholarships we have. So I'd like to bring now to the podium the 2 alumni who have come to give us our testimonial. So what we are going to do is I'm going to be asking them a quick question. They are going to answer each of them in 1 or 2 minutes. And after we have finished with a few questions, we will have questions from everybody, either to me or to them or to all of us. So the first question is, could you please introduce yourself in 1 minute and tell us what is your relation with Fulbright?
So
Sorry, because we're streaming this online, and many people are looking at us online. I think including my children who are 2, 6, and 9, so they are thinking about applying for a postdoctoral in the future. So we need you to speak here on the...
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ken Pang. I was a Fulbright postdoctoral scholar in 2008. That took me to Harvard University, specifically to the biology department, where I then spent the next 4 years before returning to Australia. Professionally, I trained as a paediatrician, but then I've spent the majority of the past 10 years, I guess, sort of in the lab doing basic biology research, sort of broadly in the field of genetics. That's probably enough of an introduction. I'll hand over to Colin.
I'm Colin Scholes. I was a scholar in 2009. If you can't tell from my rolled up sleeves, I'm an engineer. I was actually quite surprised when I got it because I didn't think engineers were what they were looking for. I went to the University of Texas at Austin, worked with some really fantastic engineers for a year, and had a great time.
Thank you very much. Now, Ken, could you tell us what was the hardest part of the application process for you?
I guess I didn't know any Fulbright scholars sort of prior to this, and I didn't really know what was sort of being expected or what they were looking for. Certainly the website was helpful, and in the end what I ended up doing was just finding people who'd received Fulbright scholarships and just spoke to them about the application process, the interview, and that was for me really helpful, just to kind of get a sense for what they were looking for. So probably that.
Colin, can you tell us what process did you go through when you were choosing university, and how do you match university and scholarship?
My work was about technology development, especially around the whole clean green energy space, and I basically chose the best person in the field to work with. And getting that introduction actually was the hardest part, getting them to say they would support me and they were happy for me to come. I got to say, in the application process, I found the hardest part was actually writing the application, because I looked at what was on the website and I looked at past scholars, and I thought I don't really fit into that field what they are, because mine's not as academically minded. Mine was development of technologies, development of new systems, and more engineering, more applied, and I didn't have that like research background I thought they were looking for. But in the end, I think that actually paid in my favor, because I didn't come across as just an academic. I came across someone who was very applied, who was trying to develop something new. And actually, when I went to Texas, I really loved that, because they were all about commercialization of technology, developing technology, moving that forward, which I wasn't getting here before I left.
Ken, could you tell us about 1 or 2 persons that made an impact in you while you were in the US?
I guess the 2 examples I can think of, one would be professional and one would be personal. At a professional level, I guess the person who was probably most influential was the principal investigator, so the lead in the lab where I was in the biology department at Harvard, and Craig, I guess, was a really good sounding board. I went over to his lab with a specific sort of idea in mind that I wanted to pursue, and he was very supportive of that and was always very available in terms of bouncing ideas off. I mean, he was obviously a very bright guy, and I really enjoyed that aspect of working with Craig, and even more broadly, just interacting with the people around the lab who generally very bright, very welcoming, very happy to sort of help out, and just as an example of the sort of environment. So on that very floor of the biology department, which wasn't was a building built in the 1930s, there'd been, I think it was 9 Nobel laureates who had worked there at some point in their careers, be it as PhD students, postdocs, lab heads, and you kind of get there is an aura about that sort of place, even though it's very basic labs compared to some of the medical research institutes that I've worked here in Australia, both before and afterwards. They put the labs I was in to shame in terms of the whiz-bang technology, and but it's really just, I think, the environment that you find yourself in and the people and that attitude of we can discover really interesting things. So that's sort of at a professional level. At a personal level, it's hard to sort of, I think, come down to one person, but I would instead summarise by saying the Fulbright chapter in Boston was very active and through that chapter, I was able to meet a whole range of other Fulbright scholars who were in Boston at the time, and they were doing lots of interesting things. And a lot of those people have subsequently become good friends, and we've travelled abroad to see them. So those friendships that I made through specifically through the Fulbright chapter were probably in many ways the thing I sort of hold most dearly about my experience.
Thank you. Colin, could you tell us some of the cultural shocks or differences that you found when you went to the US?
Well, I went to Texas, and the biggest cultural shock I had was a college football game. I loved it, just the way they went crazy. It was much better than rugby or AFL here. It was just fantastic. But at the same time, I felt everyone there was very welcoming. Everyone was wanting to know me, where I came from. They don't necessarily knew much about Australia. They could tell my accent, though. A lot of them thought I was British or Canadian, but they were all very welcome, all wanted to talk to me, all wanted to find out about Australia, and that was a great experience. That was from my landlady to the person down at the local Pizza Hut, all the way through to the people I worked with in the labs and that. But just to more emphasize what Ken said about the networks, one of the greatest things I found over in the States with the Fulbright program is the other Fulbright alumni you mix with and things like that. Like, one of the greatest experiences I had was there was a function at Washington, and one of the American Fulbright alumni was now one of the managers of the Smithsonian Institute, which is their big museum. And he took us for a day's tour around the back of it, their natural history part, seeing all the different things they had not on display in that. And that was just amazing, just spending the day just walking around, seeing all their back things, and him talking to us and telling us about it. And like, without the Fulbright, I would never have had that experience and never have made that connection. And that's one of the best things about the Fulbright, is that at the end of the day, it's not really just about your research, your little area. It's the connections you make across with other people and things like that.
Ken, could you tell us one day, now you're back, but one day you might have been in a room like this thinking about the scholarship, or maybe searching online or hearing from someone else about Fulbright. Did you feel that this was for you, and what decided you to apply?
Thinking back, certainly didn't see, receiving a Fulbright as part of my destiny or anything like that. And for those of you in the room who are considering applying, I just, encourage you to do it. I think a friend of mine who received a professional scholarship just a couple of years ago, I think I was in the park with him, and he was talking about potentially going overseas. I said, well, you should apply for a Fulbright. And he was like, oh, no, surely not. They're not looking for someone like me. And I said, look, just go for it. And, I helped him with his application. And I think he was really pleasantly surprised. And I think, as I said, I just encourage you to give it a go. You might, as Colin said, you look on the website and think, well, that's not quite me, or, maybe I'm not that sort of person. But, look, they are looking for a diversity of people, and I think it's worth a go. And certainly, if you are successful, it's a very worthwhile experience.
Colin, when you were there, and can you tell us one way after you came back in which the Fulbright experience changed your career path, if that happened?
Well, after a great... when I first came back, when you first come back, you're depressed as everything, because it's been a great year, and then you come back to Australia. No. What I found is the Fulbright program opened a lot of doors that I would not have had open for me. Just through the networks you do, and through the functions they have after you come back for the alumni support network and the Fulbright Commission and things like that. So they constantly keep you engaged, they constantly keep you up to date, and it just opens up networks, and you meet people you don't normally would ever meet, and develop good friendships with some of them. Sorry, I didn't mean to talk about the depression.
No, that's good.
Yeah, look, there's definitely culture shock, I think, both ways, going there as well as coming back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love bringing the alumni, because they say many things that we cannot say. They just tell you the truth, so that's good. We're usually in damage control. No, please don't. No, it's good because they actually are the ones who have been there, who have done it, and the information they give you. in terms of practical and logistics, you can just go to the website and find it there. But in terms of knowing what someone did and why, that is why we think that it's very valuable that they are here, and we're very thankful for that. We have just a few more questions for you. Could you tell us, Ken, a way in which personally the Fulbright experience impacted on your life?
I mean, I guess in terms of impact on my life, it probably relates to something I said earlier, which was just, the people that I met through Fulbright. A number of those people have become very close friends, friends that we've visited overseas, friends who've spent lots of time with us locally, and that for me is the sort of lasting impact on my life. I can think of at least 4 or 5 people who I now consider, close friends who we've spent lots of time on holidays with locally overseas, visiting them visiting us. And for me, that's the greatest impact of the Fulbright. So, it goes well beyond the research project. It goes beyond the funding that you receive. It's those personal connections that Colin also spoke about.
Colin, how did you decide at what point in your after you were starting probably you had finished your PhD, and how did you decide when exactly you were going to go, and how did you arrange for I don't know, in terms of job and other things that were going on in your life then for you to go to this?
Well, this is a hard one. Basically, I realized what I wanted to do I couldn't do here, or I couldn't do as well here. And I realized I needed to go overseas to get that additional experience. And when I originally applied, I must admit, I didn't think I had much of a shot because I was an engineer in a very engineering background. But I basically was almost out of a job at that time when I actually applied, and I knew that getting the Fulbright coming through would be continual employment for me at that stage. And that's partly why I applied. I thought I'll give it a go and see what happens. And I was successful, and it's been fantastic ever since.
Ken, why did you apply for Fulbright? You could have applied for many other scholarships. Why Fulbright?
Look, I think it's what the Fulbright brings apart from, just the support to do the research project. Again, as Pablo and Colin and I've already spoken about, it's kind of, they're looking for people who potentially sort of ambassadorial in their sort of outlook, people who are sort of happy to connect with others, and that idea of cultural exchange was something that really appealed to me. So, although I did apply for other scholarships, and for instance, I was supported in my time over the US by the National Health and Medical Research Council, that funding was very much, okay, here's an income for you, and that's it. The Fulbright's, goes well above and beyond that, from the time you spend in terms of the orientation program where you meet other Fulbright scholars in your cohort to, as I said, like the local Fulbright chapters in the US where, like Colin, I got the experience of going behind the scenes at the Smithsonian, the Fine Arts Museum, going to the, Boston Symphony, all those sorts of things where the chapter's like, oh, we've got some tickets, who wants to come along? And, that really made the process of moving to a new country that much more enjoyable.
So this is one question for Colin, and then a last question for both of them, and then we open the floor for questions. Colin, how do you find out the balance to decide how many months you are going to be there, and how can you tell us a bit about your decision-making process there?
To be honest, I want to go for as long as possible. So I looked up to see how long I could go. I was going to Texas, so I knew the winter would be okay. Summer was very hot, and that was it. It was, to be honest, as long as possible.
Okay, so last question for both of you. This is the same question for you. If there was one piece of advice that you would like people to take with them when they leave this room, what would that be? Ken and then Colin.
So, I mean, assuming you do put an application, I'd encourage you to craft your application in such a way that, contrary to what I said before, your story, your personal story, you want to sort of convey this, I think, the impression that this was meant to be for you. so Mark Darby, who was the former executive director when I received my Fulbright scholarship, he gave that advice to, us, told us that story subsequent to us receiving the Fulbright scholarship. And I think that was something that I took to heart, because even though you might not think, I'm Fulbright Scholar worthy, in drafting your application, I think it is important to just really, don't be afraid to sell yourself. As Australians, I think we're kind of loath to do that. The idea of writing a personal statement sort of, sends shivers down our spine in a lot of instances. But just embrace it, and kind of don't be, backwards in coming forwards, and just, sell yourself properly.
I think the most important thing is to actually tell your story. Who you are, what you've been, and where you're going to. Because that's how I think I got mine, is that I told my good story, and I got my references to tell a good story about me, because they came from all aspects of my life, and so they could talk and talk about different aspects of who I was, what I was doing, and where I was heading. And I think that's, for an application, is really what you want to do, is to tell a good story about who you are, where you're going, and how the Fulbright will help you.
Thank you. Now we have some time for questions. If possible, say who is the question for, or you can just make it a generic. But yes, please.
I have a question for either of you. But when looking for a host institution, how did you select one? And can you talk a bit more about how you opened those negotiations to get your letter of support to come?
Anywhere?
I looked around to see who was the best in my field. I already knew who that was. And to be honest, then I started looking around who they have worked with in the past in Australia. And so I followed those Australian contacts, and they then got me in contact with the person, Professor Freeman, in the States, who I was going to work with. And from there, I was able to convince them to come. Basically, what I've seen and what I've experienced is most US institutions are quite happy to take Fulbrighters. All right? They're quite happy to support you and things like that. It's just opening that communication. I use the people the professor knew in Australia to start that communication talk.
Anything to add?
Yeah, look, I was in a slightly different position in that 6 months before applying for my Fulbright, I'd actually gone to the US to check out a number of different labs that I thought might be of interest to me. And then having sort of chosen a lab on that basis, I then let them know, look, I'll be applying for different sorts of funding support, and went from there.
But usually, as a researcher, you know that there are some certain institutions that are producing some of the stuff that you are referring to or you're reading. And sometimes if you get in touch with them and just write, and even if you think, well, they don't know who I am and they are not going to answer, you'll be surprised the number of times they would actually answer and say, I am the person you're looking for, or I am not, but I can refer you to someone else. And so you start the conversation, and that way you get the link going. Is that have we responded?
You can frame that as a sort of as someone potentially applying.
That's right. You can always say, I'm thinking about applying, or for instance, at some point you may have already applied, and you say, I am thinking of this. This is my project, in summary, and that's it. And you are not lying, because you may get or not get it. You're not saying I already, but that gives them the idea that you are someone, the kind of person you are as well, just for the fact of applying. Here and then there.
This is for all of you. Following on from that, when you first approach people, did you approach them with your full application, or did you just start a conversation in case they could submit it and not interested, so you can then go and ask someone else? Or would you recommend just, this is what I'm interested in, and in the project about this, just a short email to open up the response?
Yeah, I'll let them answer first.
Okay, at the time, I got an introduction. I found someone they worked with in Australia that I started talking with, and then they sent an introduction email to the person and said, hey, this guy's good, would you be interested? And then we started the communication. Now, my perspective, now my position, I get inundated every day with people wanting to work with me. Cold call email, even though sometimes that's all you can do, isn't the best way to approach a person, because it just gets saturated and you just can't answer them, and most of the time I'll just ignore most of them, okay? But if you can find someone they already work with to get you that introduction, then that gets you open the door, because that's what happened with me. It worked perfectly.
And just following on from something Colin said, I mean, the Fulbright network is extensive, and it is very well respected in the US, and it's quite possible that if you look up previous Fulbright alumni, there may well be someone in that person's faculty who you could sort of potentially facilitate an introduction if you don't already have someone to introduce you. Given you could approach them to say, look, I'm applying for a Fulbright, I notice you're a Fulbright scholar, I'm interested in contacting a colleague in the department, would you mind kind of facilitating that introduction? So that would be one way. I mean, I actually did do the cold call email. I said, look, I'm coming to Boston whenever I was going, and I said, look, I'd like to have an opportunity to speak to you about postdoctoral opportunities. I'm happy to give a talk when I'm there and meet members of your lab. So that's how I did it.
In any case, it's always good to send first like an appetizer. So you send them a quick snapshot of who you are and what you are doing, and then once you get the conversation going, you can expand more if they are interested. And we have a very vast network of alumni, as I was saying, and we rely on them a lot. For instance, today there are 2 alumni who just came here and gave their time and their expertise for this audience. But we have the same network in the US, and the number of times that I receive from the scholarships team requests, so there's someone who wants to know, more people in this area, in that university, and so on. If we can, we connect them, and usually the number of Fulbright alumni in the US is huge, so we can always help with that as well, at least as an introduction. Yes?
Michael Thomas, UNSW. General question. I've opened up the dialogue with a not-for-profit organisation in Washington that said, yeah, we're willing to be a host institution, which is great. However, if you want an office space, we come with a cost. So I'm just can you give any advice on the level of support from a host institution that's outside of the university framework? What could I expect there?
Yeah, well, we have a scholarship in non-for-profit leadership, and so I understand in that field it's not exactly like going to a university and doing research, but you are in the category of postdoctoral scholarship. Yeah, we don't get very often this the case in which they are charging you for going there. So I guess the ideal thing is that if the institution you are going to are interested in what you are doing, and they are ready or prepared to at least help you in a way, with an office or so on. So there are many non-for-profit organizations in the US, and I will be happy to give you some information about people who have done this and have been there as well, because yeah, it sounds that you are going to give them your expertise, so some support on their behalf would be good. So you have to, and this is a general advice for everybody, piece of advice, try to look for an institution that is very interested in you as well. Not only happy to tolerate you there, but also really interested in what you are going to bring there. And there will be an institution, so you just have to look for it. Try to that's one of the skills of the Fulbrighter, to be creative and to have initiative. So look for an institution that is so interested in you that will give you some support, maybe not money, but at least a place, and they are going to be interested in what you have to say and do. Do you have any other ideas on this from your experience? That's okay. Yeah. Yes, over there.
I've got a few questions here. Firstly, you were talking about being overseas for more than a year, but I noticed that we're talking about 3 to 10 months for the Fulbright Scholarship. I was wondering how you explain that, whether there's other funding sources that you mentioned used to. Secondly, who reviews the applications predominantly? Is it predominantly academics, or is it a mixture of academics and other non-academics? And finally, is there any different advice for people who are looking to go for 3 months in terms of what they're planning to achieve for their project compared to someone who's planning to be there for multiple years?
Okay, so we're going to respond to this question, and then we're going to continue our conversation here on the floor, because I think our colleagues from the streaming services are going to close this in a few more minutes. So regarding the space of time, we support you for only 3 to 10 months. So if you apply for a Fulbright scholarship, that should be the time that you stay there. Because otherwise you are going to run out of money, and it's going to be a very difficult situation. The second question was regarding, can you remind me, please? Peer reviews. So we have a selection panels have usually 5 or 6 people, and each of them comes from a different field. Some people may come from academia, some people may come from government, some people may come from professional organizations, from sponsors, and they are all very high caliber people, but they may not know exactly, or not all of them at least, your field. So it's important because of that to write the application in a way that anybody could understand it. So this is, usually you go through a panel like that at the beginning, and then there may be a national panel here in Canberra when we meet again, different people, and then you have another panel in the US. So you usually you may go through the examination of 12 to 18 people to go through the process. Yeah. Did any one of you want to add anything to the question? There was a third question.
The first question is, how do you explain that they're talking about multiple years?
Not multiple years, but firstly, once you're there, you kind of want to stay. If the work, what you're doing is really interesting and you're passionate in it, you really want to stay. In my case, I wanted to stay for quite a bit longer. Now, I was lucky to be able to get support from the person I was visiting to actually keep me on for a couple more months, okay? And that extended it out of time. That's the best I can say for my example.
And yeah, in my case, again, I was able to sort of secure additional funding. So through the National Health and Medical Research Council, I was supporting me for 2 years overseas. And then after that, I was able to then find funding. My boss, I guess, was able to kind of secure funding for my salary for those additional 2 years.
So as long as you are not, you don't receive 2 different sources of funding from the Australian government or the US government for your project, Fulbright can be compatible with other sources of funding as well, because we're aware that some people may want to or may need to stay longer or not. So we are going to, I would like to thank our alumni, Ken and Colin, for coming here, and thank you all of you for staying. We're going to be down here. We have a Fulbright Distinguished Chair, Doug Cochran, who is down there from the University of Arizona. We have the Fulbright Ambassador, Zlatko Skirbis. He has been in selection panels. So feel free to go and ask any of us any question, and so that you can get all the answers. And we hope to see your applications. Thank you very much.